Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Thank you so much, Lianne, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast and talk about your son, Luke.
Thanks, Marcy, for having me.
Yes. So you are yet another Canadian that I have on the program today, but you are not from Ontario.
That's right. No, I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, so right in the prairies there. And I've listened to probably almost every episode, and I've listened to my fellow Canadians and have actually made some new friends that way too. So it's been a good way to build a community as well.
Isn't it though? I have found that really amazing. I recently started a support group through Starlight Ministries, and I have several people that are listeners or former guests that are a part of that support group now. So it's pretty neat. So I feel like I'm getting to know them even better, and they're from all over. So it's a way to expand Starlight Ministries a little bit and a way to really get to know these people a little bit better. I keep on telling myself, maybe I need to do something a little more through the podcast and try to get people together, because I think it would be really healing for all of us.
It's really interesting how even organically, though, you find these people and you find a community, right, without necessarily even always looking for it. And, you've got sort of sub-communities. I have some folks I connect with virtually that aren't here. But then now I've started to connect more with some moms that are local, and even moms that have lost kids to cancer like we have, which really feels like a good home for me because it's such a relatable story. And so we're even trying to figure out if we can set up our own support group just for kind of that niche, because, it is really powerful. And to be able to even go and meet a friend for coffee after you've been in these virtual support groups is even nicer if you're all in the same community.
Oh, absolutely. We were just talking on that recently. Gwen and I did the live stream about support and who you turn to for support. And it is funny how those other bereaved parents can end up being some of your closest support system. I feel like I called Stephanie and when in a really dark moment, because I knew that she would understand where I had been. And I knew if I called anyone else, they would panic and freak out and want to put me in a psychiatric hospital. And I knew that she would just listen and not get scared, because you do get to a dark place sometimes. And and if you are in a really dark place and you really are, thinking about hurting yourself or something like that, then you do need to get professional help for sure. But sometimes I know I don't. I just need someone to understand and not panic with me, Yeah.
And I think I heard on another podcast, you're talking about things that can maybe seem gruesome to others who aren't in that world, right? And sometimes, you just need someone that you can just say out loud, I just have a memory of the doctor having to do this, or Luke not being able to do that. And it's deep and dark stuff that, some people in your life, you want to shelter from that. Whereas another mom who had to sit there and watch their child pass from cancer would totally get that and go, oh, I remember we had to try this drug and that, and this was difficult. And you can just kind of get it off your chest a little bit without...
I think you're right. I think there are two things that you're trying to do there. One, you're trying to protect those who love you, because you don't want them to actually have that memory too, for you to put that on them. And then the second thing, you may have other friends that just couldn't handle it and wouldn't be able to know what to do. And and wouldn't be able to support you well. So that ends up not being a good support source for you either. So
Yeah.
well, why don't you start out and just tell us all about Luke? Because I want to hear all about him.
Sure.
And this, just to put this out there, this Luke is spelled differently than my last Luke. So it is going to be still fine in my title because you are L-U-C instead of L-U-K-E. So
yes. And Luke is actually, for me, his name is Luc. So we're French Canadian. So it's spelled with a C because it's the Francophone spelling. So I say Luc, you say Luke, and that is perfectly fine. And what we're used to certainly here in Manitoba. But Luc is our firstborn. He was born on May 8th, 2010. So just shy of 11 years old when he passed. Like with firstborns for us, he was also the first grandson. So grandchild, I should say, on both sides. So definitely the pride of the family and, a special place in the heart of the grandparents for sure. We also have two daughters, Stella and Olivia. They're 8 and 4, and I'll talk a little bit more about Olivia and sort of the special nature of her arrival and her place in Luke's story. But Luc was, like a lot of boys, very sporty. I remember his first word was actually ball, and in French it's ball. So, it kind of goes both ways. But loved all sports. And like a good Canadian boy, he loved hockey. He loved playing hockey. He loved watching hockey, playing soccer, playing baseball. And I think at the root of it all was, he really loved being on a team. He loved team sports. He loved being with other kids. He loved the camaraderie that came with being on a team. Here in the prairies, we are in an urban center, but we have access to a lot of green space, not that far away. So, very outdoorsy. He loved collecting sticks. I remember when he was a kid, he would just take piles of wood and stack them up and then take them apart and make another pile of wood. And, he loved being around the campfire and playing with chopping wood as he got older and helping his dad stoke the fire. Loved nature, loved being at the beach, loved throwing rocks, loved collecting rocks, biking, making sandcastles. We have a lot of fond memories of being at the cabin at the lake and being able to just spend some time outdoors as a family. As a firstborn, which I am also a firstborn, so we share some similar traits. I always found him to be a little bit more on the cautious side. I was never, as a child, I was never worried about him flinging himself off of furniture or, climbing a little too high on the play structure. He was always, very careful, liked to follow rules. He was very rule oriented, which, I am as well. And always concerned about doing the right thing. And so, that all made him a very polite child, very friendly, but also, a little bit on the quieter side. He was a bit shyer. He certainly wasn't the one that was always standing out in the crowd. He preferred to be on the sidelines, to be, I call him the cheerleader. When he was on those teams, he was always on the sidelines, kind of supporting all the other players, encouraging them, cheering them on, but didn't like to be in the spotlight, didn't like a lot of attention, which was challenging for him as he got older and his illness took a big front page for our family and did put it on him. I say he's quiet. I remember one story, during the pandemic, of course, like with everybody, we were trying to do everything on Zoom. And so I had him in piano lessons and his sister Stella in piano lessons. And I would just kind of listen in a little bit to his Zoom lesson with his teacher. And, she'd ask all sorts of questions trying to engage him. And, the answers were always, yep, good, yep, okay, nodding, just, a boy of few words at times.
This sounds like my life sort of as a pediatrician sometimes. Sometimes I go into a room and they just will chatter and never stop. And then other times I keep asking them questions. How's school? Good. What's your favorite thing about school? I don't know. I mean, what's your favorite vegetable? Carrots. It's just it's like one word answers to everything. So I totally get that.
Pretty much, yeah. And whereas his sisters are just nonstop, his sister would be in a piano lesson and I'd be kind of trying to get her to stop talking and actually, do
play the piano. Yeah.
Despite being quiet, he was certainly comfortable with people. He liked meeting new people. He felt comfortable with adults. Because of his illness, he spent a lot of time with adults, with healthcare practitioners. And so he was never intimidated by that setting. He was never, afraid or shy. He just, wasn't the most talkative, but certainly always very kind and very polite. And, we've had cards and staff mention how good of a boy he was.
Yeah.
How nice he was.
That's so nice.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm pissed, so I wouldn't cry, but.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
I cry all the time. I cry pretty much every day.
Yeah, me too.
I may cry here in the middle of this, In fact, I kind of already am. So there we go.
All right. But he was a very good, that's a common message that we got after he passed, how kind and sweet and nice he was, despite his circumstances and what he was dealing with.
Yeah.
His friends, he, as I said, he was a big cheerleader. So we loved the team thing. And with that, it made him a very welcoming person. He was very inclusive. He always wanted to meet new friends. He never wanted to exclude anybody. So a lot of the kids in school mentioned that how nice he was to them and how special he made them feel.
Oh, and that's such a great thing. When your kids make other kids feel special, you can't ask for more than that. You can't.
He was sick on and off for 4 years. And so these kids kind of knew his story and were in and out of his life as he was doing this. And, they'd send cards and they'd make pictures and they'd call him a hero. And he didn't want to be a hero,
No, he didn't.
He just wanted to be himself. He was very humble that way. Like I said, he didn't like a lot of fuss. He didn't like a lot of attention, For him, he was just himself and he didn't know how else to be. So for someone to call him a hero, that's not what he was trying to do.
He just wanted to be a regular kid.
Exactly. He was just trying to get through it. This one is a bit of I had to mention it because it was such a beautiful sentiment. But, he was 10 when he passed. And so kids at the age of 10, they're maturing. And, I encouraged his friends' moms to, if his friends wanted to share anything or, write a letter or a card for him or something, that we would really like that. And one of his friends actually wrote him a poem, which I thought was just so sweet.
Oh, yeah.
Boy. And it really sums up what he was like, because even in the poem he said, even when I drop the ball, you never get mad at me.
Oh.
And sorry. And I just wish you could get mad at me one more time.
Oh.
And I just thought that was so sweet. And that's the stuff that cuts deep. you know, thinking of those young boys and what they have lost in a friend. And seeing them, seeing those words and getting that love from these little boys and letting them be vulnerable and the insight and the maturity that shows. It's just so beautiful and so heart-wrenching at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. On a lighter note, you know, he did love to laugh, right? You know, he loved telling jokes, joke books, and he kind of, as much as he didn't love the spotlight, you know, at home, he loved to get in center stage and tell us some jokes and to do pranks, because his favorite movie is Home Alone, and he's obsessed with
Favorite
Home Alone.
movie is what? Sorry.
Home Alone.
Home Alone.
Want to watch it all the time. He'd even say, I know it's not even Christmas yet, but can we watch it again?
Oh, wow.
And play games. And, you know, he was a lighthearted, sort of happy child, as I said, even though he had to deal with a lot. Again, sort of maybe firstborn trait, or maybe a little bit of myself in there. You know, he was very organized as a kid. He loved having everything kind of in its place. He took a lot of pride in his bedroom, and he'd have everything organized. And I took photos actually of his room after he passed, just because it really showcased how, you know, his things were always neatly placed. He had a section for all his Nerf guns and all of his, you know, toys like that. And then he had all of his Winnipeg Jet gear all out on display. He was a big fan. Like I said, he loved hockey, so he's a big fan of the Winnipeg Jets. And the whole room was sort of Jets themed. And he really loved that about it. You know, another thing he got to do, which was a really special opportunity for him here in Manitoba, when it's not COVID, they have a camp for kids with cancer. And so he was able to attend 3 years in a row. And he loved camp. Like I said, he loved being outdoors. He loved being with other kids. And so that really appealed to his nature. He was able to go swimming and wall climb and play, you know, at the beach and make all sorts of new friends. And as quiet as he made friends easily. You know, as I said, I put him on the bus and he didn't know anybody on that bus, and he didn't care, you know, he just wanted to get there, and he just made friends once he got there. So, you know, I said earlier, his littlest sister, Olivia, certainly had a special role in our family. So I had always thought I'd have kids. So I had Luke and I had Stella, and our little family was complete. And in 2016, I actually ended up getting pregnant in the fall. And coincidentally enough, that was 1 month before he was first diagnosed. And so I've thought about that a lot, about the timing of that, and how grateful I am now to have her. I always have been, but just to have her in our life as, you know, a new addition to the family. And she came really when we needed that the most.
When you needed a little gift, right?
Yeah. And so that certainly resulted in the short term for some challenges for us. You know, I was pregnant. We had a son who was going through treatment.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit, about kind of the beginning and his diagnosis and what happened?
Sure. So in 2016, in the fall, but shortly right after I found out I was expecting, you know, developed a few fevers, colds, infections of some sort. With young kids, that's, as you know, pretty common, especially in that time. But, they were kind of lingering longer than normal for him. So we take him into the walk-in clinic or to the urgent care, and the physicians tended to just sort of say it's a viral thing, it'll pass, it's going around. And so we would just kind of, okay, just keep going with life. But then there were some things that just were atypical for viruses in our house. I noticed that on the back of his head, his lymph nodes were swollen. He'd have kind of big bumps on the back of his head.
Yeah.
And tired, really, really tired. One day I remember I went to pick him up at his daycare, and he was sleeping in the gym, in the corner, while everybody's playing. He just fell asleep. He was 6 at the time. And that just seemed off to me,
Yeah, for sure.
At that age. And then one night he came into our room in the middle of the night and said, my legs really hurt. And again, I thought, maybe it's a flu, body aches, stuff like that. His hips were hurting, his legs were hurting. And so I kept him with my parents, and I went to work. But my mom kept saying, it's not getting better. His legs really hurt. He can't really go up the stairs. So I thought, I better call our doctor, none of this in business. And, I explained what was going on, and the nurse basically said, can you be here in like half an hour? So then your heart starts racing, right? Because you think, oh my gosh, maybe this is a big deal, right? I certainly tried to parent from a place of not assuming the worst case scenario all the time, right? And I tried to trust things, and but then at that point my instincts were telling me maybe this is really serious. So I just dropped everything, took him to the pediatrician, and she took a look at him and said, I think you should go for blood work right now. And we're closed. So you have to go to the Children's Hospital and get blood work done. So just a whirlwind. Took the blood work, went home, and then we got a call from the ER doctor at about 11 o'clock at night. Said, I think you should come in and pathogenic.
Yeah.
So at that point, that now the mind's going all sorts of places, right? So at that point, the ER doctor took us in, and I just remember he put us in a room, and then he closed the curtain to the outside hallway and asked me to sit down. And so that's when I knew it was going to be some pretty serious business here. So he was diagnosed with ALL, which is acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is a childhood leukemia and the most common childhood leukemia, and probably the most prevalent childhood cancers that are out there. But, they don't mess around with that. And so we were admitted right away, he had a PIC put in the next day, he had a biopsy done. I later found out that the pain in his hips and in his legs where his bone marrow was just full, 98% cancer cells. And so there was no room, it was just filling up quickly. But right away met with the oncologist, who became our oncologist for several years. And she was very, very reassuring, It's if you're going to get a childhood cancer, this is the one you want to get.
Yep.
So unfortunately for us, this was 3 days before Christmas. So we spent Christmas at the hospital doing chemotherapy. But, at that point, it didn't really matter. Christmas was just not important. Even Luke, again, I kind of will touch on this, his resiliency and positive attitude was already coming out at an early age there. he didn't complain about missing Christmas. He, just figured, okay, let's just get to work and let's get better. And we tried to make it fun. And, Christmas in the hospital might seem pretty grim, but in a children's hospital, there's a lot of greatness in it. That came, again, pre-COVID, all these things that maybe don't happen right now, but Santa came and we just got gifts and gifts and gifts from strangers. And
we try to, I've obviously worked in a children's hospital through many Christmases, and you do try to make it as special as you possibly can, because it just, you don't want it to be like any other day.
No. And, I've never been a recipient really of, the generosity of strangers. I have in like little bits, of course, but the show of support and the kindness that we felt while we were there was very humbling. And, I just kept thinking, well, we don't need these things, right? Like, we're just regular people, but, it started to give me a better sense of this whole other world, where you can help other kids, you can help families through holidays. And, all I wanted to do was turn around and give back to someone else, so it really sparked something in me that we'll touch on a little bit later about how we've tried to give back since being recipients of so much generosity. But just to fast forward a bit, so we were now in, leukemia treatment. So it was 3.5 years of treatment. Early on is certainly much more expensive. We did a month at the beginning.
You cut out there a little bit. Sorry. You said, So you said that it was at the beginning it was, and then I didn't really catch that.
Right. So the first month was really, really intensive for him. As you know, 98% chemo or cancer in his bone marrow. They really needed to get that down to less than 0% to know that it was responding. But what that meant, because he was already so weak to begin with, that first month was very difficult for him. He ended up needing to get on a feeding tube because he wasn't eating enough. His liver was starting to act up. He actually stopped walking because of the steroids. Significant amount of steroids affect your muscle. But we knew that we just had to keep going, and try to get through it. And so after that first month, we got a biopsy done and sent some cells out for testing, actually in Cincinnati, I think. And that's when we found out at first that his leukemia was actually considered very high risk. So it wasn't
that standard ALL that they thought.
Yeah, so he had a genetic mutation that I forget what it's called now, but it just meant that his cancer would be a little more resistant to treatment and it could reoccur. And so at that point, they kind of changed the protocol and went way more intensive, longer. So that put us at about 10 months of really intensive treatment. And as I was saying, at that point, I was pregnant and expecting our third child. So, there were those times where it challenged our stay positive, stick to the plan kind of attitude, but we really just wanted to get through that first intensive part. I actually gave birth in July, and he was admitted to the hospital for almost a month in August for an infection and then just for some side effects of his chemo. So you can imagine I'm trying to take care of one child, and I've got a newborn with me and trying to sleep and nursing. And but we had to have a great support system, and my parents and my mother-in-law would come and do the night shift with him so I could do the night shift at home with the baby. I also had another child, so my husband was, sort of quarterbacking with that. But what it did do is create a bond between him and her.
Yeah.
Because he's with her. And I even have pictures of him in the hospital, and she's a tiny, tiny baby on the bed with him. And he's sitting for her, and I have videos of that, which are beautiful and haunting at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we got through that summer, and I finally got to sleep again, and he got home, and we were considered in remission in the fall.
Yeah.
So he went back to school. And then at that point, we decided we wanted to give back. We had felt that generosity that Christmas, and we wanted to not only celebrate that he was on the road to recovery, but also to be able to give back. So right before Christmas in 2017, we had a huge party in a gym, and we had all the kids from his school come and all our family and friends, and we had a toy drive. We had a toy drive for the Children's Hospital. We asked for monetary donations, and then I actually have pictures of him at the Children's Hospital with a big check and a pile of gifts we were able to give to them. And that felt really good for us to be able to help those other families that were going to be there at Christmas, right?
Right. Because certainly you hoped that you would never have to do anything like that again. Those days were done. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for a while I thought they were. I really did.
Yeah.
We were in what's called maintenance treatment, which is basically low dose chemo orally, over the period of 2.5 years. So although he was still a cancer patient, quote unquote, life felt really normal for us.
Yeah.
He was in school, he was playing hockey. We went on vacation, we went to Mexico, we'd go camping. We actually built a cottage as a family, and, we were working, going to school. I really wanted to put that chapter of my life behind me. And I didn't even want to be in that community, to be honest. I really distanced myself from that cancer community because I thought, you know what, that's not really us anymore. And in April of last year was the end of his treatment, 2020. So this was just the start of the pandemic here. And so it was very limited as to who could go in with him. It was only one parent allowed. But we went to the clinic because we still had to go to clinic every month. We went to the clinic, and he got to ring the bell. I don't know if you're aware, but when kids finish treatment, they ring a bell. And everybody watches, and you take videos. I actually grew to really hate that bell after that, actually.
Yeah.
And I'll explain why, but it was just a false sense of hope for us.
Yeah.
Because in June, we were able to get his port removed. Again, everything was going great. We were done chemo. The monthly blood work was looking good. He had just turned 10. So we had the port removed in June. Spent the summer at the cabin in July. He was at the beach. He was having a great time, having fires. We weren't taking pills anymore. And we really just, pandemic aside, we were having a really great summer as a family, just making the best of our time together. And then in August, we went for the monthly blood work again. And now they were wanting us to do it all over the phone because they wanted less people in the clinic and bring them in. So we went to the lab, got the blood work done, came home, and then his nurse called and said, you guys should come in today. There's something off in the blood work. We need to talk to you. And right away, I just went.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, we're back here again.
Yeah.
So we went in and they confirmed that his leukemia had come back. So he stopped taking chemo pills in May, and it's August now, and it's already back. So, all of a sudden now we're thrust into that world. We just had his port removed. Now he's going to put in the next day. We're talking about admissions. And all of a sudden I went from, this early feeling the first time of, let's just get through it. Let's just stay positive. This is textbook. Let's just do it.
Yep.
And now I'm afraid, I'm thinking, well, it didn't work. So now what options do we have? It's not textbook. It's frustrating because, as an aside, September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And, we've done a lot this month to just recognize those kids and just appreciate all those stories that are here locally with our kids. And, it just reinforced how small of a percentage we were, there's 48 new kids that get cancer here every year in a province of 1.3 million people. We were one of 48, which is a small amount.
Yeah, it is a small amount.
And then within that, we were the small amount of kids who have the very high risk version. And then we were the small amount of those kids that actually relapse. And so, it just reinforced for me how, whatever could go wrong for him just kind of continued. And I'll touch a bit more on that after, because again, he just kind of had the worst case scenario for everything all around.
Yeah.
So what they wanted to do for him, because the sort of textbook stuff wasn't going to work, is they wanted to do a stem cell transplant. Mm-hmm. So that's serious stuff. I do have a funny story though, just to take you back a minute. So when we went into that blood work result and we knew it was bad news, the doctor told us that his leukemia had relapsed, and I all of a sudden started getting emotional, and Nick just looks at me and he's like, "Do I have COVID?" About having COVID. And I was like, what are we doing to these poor kids?
Right.
And then when I said, no, you just have, I said, you don't have COVID, but your cancer came back. He's like, oh, phew.
Oh, my word. Oh. That's not a few, actually.
But, for him, he was like, okay, well, we've done this before, Mom, so we just have to do what the doctor tells us and follow the plan. And I'm used to going to the hospital. I'm used to getting pokes and all that. So I guess we just got to keep going.
Do it again and we'll be fine.
Yeah. And he kept that attitude for the whole time, let's just do what the doctor says. And, we can't change it. So let's just stay positive. And we really tried to do that for him as well. But underneath all of that, like I said, there was a lot of fear. And as we learn more about the stem cell transplant, what would be involved, it's risky and it's hard on little bodies,
Yeah.
But, we jumped into September, knowing this transplant was going to happen soon. He had to do another month of chemo. So we're back at the hospital after 2.5 years. We're seeing all the same staff again. And they all walk in, all these nurses, and go, I'm not happy to see you right now. Or I'm not happy to see you again.
Yeah.
These poor people, they have this revolving door, I'm sure, of kids that they see more often than they would like, as much as, you build those relationships. But, he was still just trying to have a good time. One day he ended up making slime with one of the staff, slime. because he's still a little boy and he's still that playful kid, right? And he decided that he wanted to make farting noises with it under the blanket. And when one of the nurses would come to check his bandages, he would fart. And then he didn't know what it was. We had this whole scheme, right? And he kept trying to tell him, like, you can't, you got to keep a straight face. Like, you can't let it on that this is what we're doing. Except that he kept like psyching himself out. He's like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I. He was laughing so hard, and so he tried really hard to pull it off, but he was laughing at himself too much. And he just had so much fun with that slime. And the one nurse happened to be one of the nurses that's super, super fun. And so they together took turns trying to make different noises, and they probably kept that up for a good 15 minutes. So, there was a lot of trying to have fun at the same time. Mm-hmm. But, he went back to school virtually online. So he was doing his classes from his hospital room, and he was excited about having a new computer, and he was excited about trying to do his schoolwork. And, we were just trying to make the best of our new facility yet again. And, through that, I was trying to figure out ways to cope, because I knew that now our options may be limited, and we, we're in a bit of a riskier position. So I had a really good therapist, and she got me on to mindfulness concepts, where mm-hmm. I really tried to practice just being present in the moment. And I started a gratitude journal, and I tried to really quiet my mind and stop myself from going to those scary places. And that really was a tool that served me really well then, and is a tool that served me really well since. As far as my healing is concerned. Anyway, so it's a bit of a long story for him. But we did get the transplant in November. His father donated a stem cell. We could not find a full match donor. So his dad was the half match donor of his stem cells. And that resulted in about 5 weeks in the hospital for us. And by all accounts, the transplant was successful. The new cells were growing, they were healthy. He had kind of gotten through the worst of the transplant, because with the transplant, you need radiation, you need really heavy chemo. Yeah. You're basically emptying the bone marrow of everything.
Everything, yeah. You're getting rid of everything.
Really, it's really hard on those kids. So there's a lot of side effects, but he got through it all. And we were able to go home for Christmas. So we went home for Christmas. And, one of the great gifts we got, being a smaller center here, the Cancer Care Foundation is very supportive of the families. And they had arranged for one of the Winnipeg Jets, the captain, Blake Wheeler, to come and bring us gifts. And
oh, wow.
And him and his wife came, and was so kind.
And he was so excited, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What a thrill.
Quiet, reserved way. He's starstruck, I think.
Uh-huh.
But he got a signed jersey, and it was just such a nice memory for him. And because it was COVID, Christmas was very different. We didn't see family. We didn't have any gatherings. But he was so... after transplant, they actually have to isolate kids for 100 days mm-hmm. Because their immune systems are so immature and weak to begin with. And so we knew we'd have to be isolated anyway. So
right. In some ways, it was a little bit of a blessing, right? You weren't missing out, because it just wasn't happening. Right.
No. And after spending 5 weeks in the hospital, it was nice just to be home as a family, just the five of us. But he was starting at that point to show some early signs of graft versus host disease, which is the way essentially his new cells and his old immune system, I guess, kind of fighting each other. They're having a trouble settling in, I guess, into the new body. And so that caused a lot of rashes all over his body. which, for us was a nuisance for him, itchy and stuff, but it's a rash, not that big of a deal. But Christmas night, I remember again, he came into my room late at night and said, my stomach hurts. My stomach really hurts. And I just thought he'd eaten too much Christmas goodies. After being in a transplant, he hadn't really eaten a lot when he was in the hospital because it was so hard on his body. So I just figured that he was just having difficulty digesting and getting used to eating real food again. But it persisted. We went to our family cabin, and spent a few days there. And it just wasn't getting better. He was getting a lot of diarrhea. And so they said, you know what, I think we should admit him again. So I was like, all right, back to the hospital we go. And at that point, they said, we think he has graft versus host in his gut, which makes it really difficult for him to eat. And so that meant he wasn't allowed to eat anymore. He had to have all his nutrition through his PIC. He had TPN. And then they had to give him a lot of immunosuppressants, steroids, and different things to keep his immune system down so that flare-up would settle. But it wasn't really working. And again, that small percentage, right? He was a small percentage of a child who actually gets graft versus host disease, because a lot of transplant kids don't get that.
Yeah.
And then he was a smaller percentage of the kids who actually don't respond to the medication. So they were giving him all these immunosuppressants. They were having to give him adult doses even. And it wasn't really doing anything. So they said, well, maybe go home for a bit, try to do a bland diet, keep him hydrated, and we'll see what happens. That didn't go so well. So we were home for maybe a week, and he was just in a lot of pain. His stomach hurt. He wasn't eating. His steroids, because he'd been on steroids for so long, much like when he was a little kid at 6, caused him to not be able to walk again. So now he's 10, much bigger, and that's harder.
Yeah.
And so we actually had to go back. And I remember taking him to the clinic and going, we can't do this at home. It's just too hard. But when I got there, I was all stressed out trying to figure out how to get him out of the car. He can't walk at that point. And I went to go get him, and I forgot to put the car in park. And so I ended up rear-ending the car in front of me at the entrance of cancer care. And the guy came out, and I came out, and I just started bawling.
Yeah.
And I said, I have a child and he can't walk. And I was just so stressed out that week. And this poor old man was like, hey, are you doing help? And I was like, no. Anyway, the cars were damaged, but it was just this, I thought, oh, that poor old man, he was not expecting me that day.
Right.
So I'll try to fast forward a bit. So that was the last admission we had. That was in February. Again, still just being treated for his graft versus host disease. No progress, no changes. And we were ready to just live there for months if we had to. We were going to try to work from there. We were going to do the school thing from there. We thought we'll just be on TPN. The doctors kept saying it just takes time. We'll write it out. Things all of a sudden changed. His liver function wasn't great. He had his bowels stopped working, so he almost had a bowel rupture. He had breathing problems all of a sudden. And one night I get a call from my husband saying, they're moving us to the ICU. And at that point I thought, oh God, this just escalated big time. Once you get admitted to the ICU, it's just a whole other animal. Meanwhile, he's aware of what's going on, but just a bit confused about why he's moving. And we were only in the ICU for 4 days, but every day something went wrong.
Yeah.
First, his lungs were an issue. So then they put him on oxygen and that helped, but then that wasn't enough. So then they needed to intubate him. And then his heart was starting to look funny. And then his kidneys were starting to fail. He stopped passing urine. And the bigger concern was his blood counts were dropping like by the hour. They transfused him all day long and nothing was staying, and he was starting to bleed internally. And, you know, they poke him for a finger poke, and it wouldn't stop bleeding because his platelets weren't working.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand what was going on, you know, all of a sudden just multiple organ failure. They thought he had this thrombotic microangiopathy, which is a bit of a residual issue from the graft versus host, which I think is basically his blood vessels were kind of leaking everywhere. And so they found a drug for that. And then they got a viral result, and they saw that he had a virus, one of the adenoviruses in him, which is actually a virus that a lot of people have. It's almost like a common cold living in it. But for him, because he'd been on immunosuppressants for so long, it was all over his body at that point.
Yeah.
So on the last day, they were thinking of putting him on dialysis. And because it was COVID, we couldn't have visitors. This whole time we were in the hospital with him for 11 weeks. We couldn't have visitors, but on the last day, I pleaded that they allow the grandparents to come. So they let my parents and my mother-in-law come. And they came just in time. Before they hooked him up to dialysis, they got the blood work back for the viral blood work because they hadn't looked at the blood work yet. And meanwhile, they called us back into the room, and his blood pressure had dropped, and he was crashing, basically. And they said that with the virus, the way it had taken over his body, there was no way to save him.
Yeah.
And the doctor even said, it all makes sense now why all these things started to go wrong.
Right.
This virus had been in his body. You know, they took that blood work a week before he died, and they only got the results a week later, which I struggled with a bit. They said as soon as it took over, it wouldn't matter if we caught it on day one.
No. No.
His immune system didn't exist, basically, at that point.
Yeah.
But, you know, they had put him to sleep that morning because we thought we were doing dialysis. So they needed to put another line in. At that point, I think he had 6 lines going. And so when we put him to sleep, we said goodbye. We didn't know what would happen that day. Every day we woke up thinking he didn't die today. But he didn't for 3 days in the ICU. But every time he went to sleep, I always took an opportunity to just say bye, just in case.
Yeah.
And so he just thought he was going to sleep. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
That he didn't know. I don't think he knew what was happening to him.
Yeah.
He was so used to being in the hospital, tubes and blood and pain and doctors, you know, this was just more problems, right?
Yeah.
And so we were able to say goodbye. And then when we were told about the virus kind of taking over and that there was no hope, we were able to sit with my parents and my mother-in-law and asked them to just sit with him. He was sedated at that point. He was stable. But we were able to end his life peacefully.
Yeah.
Which I'm so for to have been there with him. And just for us to be over.
Yeah.
For him and for us, it was
a long journey.
It is. And that time in the ICU was just perfect. every day. And you don't know if it's life-threatening or not, and the doctors can't give you any reassurance anymore.
Right. But they don't want to give up either. And
No, and there was just so many people on his side. Came for him until the end, and I think they were grateful, and we were grateful that we were able to come to that decision easily. It wasn't a difficult decision for us at that point.
Right.
It's like, my son was gone for that.
Yeah.
And, his body and his body had failed him. And at that point, he wasn't my happy, active, sporty 10-year-old. He was on a gurney, in a catheter, in a diaper, not being able to walk, with an intubation. He can't talk. It wasn't him. It's not who he's meant to be. There was really nothing. They said there was really nothing they could do. So they left us with him, and he gave us all the time we needed, and it was peaceful. And still, I remember when the curtain finally opened and it was done. It happened that his room was right across from the nurse's desk, and there was probably 20 people just standing there.
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody just stopped.
Yeah. I know.
And it was beautiful. And I just was so respectful of us. And you can almost picture the phones are ringing and people aren't answering them because they just stood there.
Yeah.
Out of respect. And all of his oncology team actually came in, some from their homes, our doctors and our nurse practitioners who we've known for years. And they came into the room and we all hugged, even though we weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
So we all hugged and they were crying. And I couldn't believe these forces, these formidable, oncologists that I have so much respect for, that are so intelligent, and they're sitting there crying with us.
Yep.
It was so touching.
Yeah.
We weren't just a file or a number to them. And that made me feel it was a beautiful moment. And nobody rushed us out, and nobody, made us feel like we needed to leave. Everybody gave the time we needed. And I remember when we were finally ready to go, I had to get buzzed back in to the unit to go get something. And I had, for the last 4 days, used that buzzer a million times. And every time I had to pick up and then say who I was. And so I picked up the phone and I said, "It's Luke, Mom." And that just hurt so much.
Yeah.
Because then I thought, who am I now? Am I still his mom? It just...
Yeah.
That was taken. And,
that you are still Luke's mom. Luke's mom always and forever.
But it just felt so much to say it, because I just couldn't believe I was actually leaving without him.
Yeah.
I'd been in that hospital for 11 weeks, November. I had bags and bags, and we always had lots of stuff to keep us busy. And then I'm leaving with all this stuff in garbage bags and no sun.
Yeah.
Hard.
Oh, the hardest thing ever. Yeah.
But anyway, even in that moment, as hard as it was, I did find myself feeling that gratitude and trying to tap into the gratitude that I was trying to hold on to when he was sick. and when it was so hard. And, you know, I was grateful for being there with him. I was grateful that my family could be there. I remember even like thanking the ICU doctor for everything she'd done. And meanwhile, she's like, you don't need to thank me. I just felt so grateful for what everybody did for him, even if it didn't work. I just know they tried their hardest to save him.
Yeah. Yep.
So then it's, you know, mourning during COVID. So
Yeah.
I can certainly talk a little bit about what that was for us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We couldn't have a service. At that point in time, we were allowed, you know, 10 people at a funeral. And if I counted heads, it was pretty much my immediate family and my husband's immediate family, who at a point were already at our house.
Yeah.
We just, you know what, COVID be damned, we're not sitting here alone. So we had invited our in-laws and my parents and my brother over for dinner, and we just kind of had to be together.
Right.
It was the extent of our socialization, but that's all I really had the capacity for at that point anyway. But, you know, for me, honestly, and I've been asked this question before, I'm actually kind of grateful that COVID prevented us from having to do the big hoopla of service and having all sorts of people come to our home and come into our space, because I was actually really grateful to do it alone and to have that privacy. It didn't mean that people weren't providing support, but doing it in a more distant kind of way.
Yeah.
So, you know, we got gifts every day. Something would show up at our house, messages, cards. One of the teachers at his school actually made these little hearts.
Oh, so cool.
All the students and the teachers were wearing them.
Oh,
So
I love it. I love it.
And, you know, we felt the support. We just didn't have to be in a crowd to do that. And actually another really special thing that happened, because they knew, Cancer Care knew what a Jets fan he was. They did a tribute to him at one of their games.
Wow.
It was Hockey Fights Cancer is a fundraising initiative that they have with the Jets. And they profiled 2 kids, one who's still living and Nick. And they talked about him and they showed photos, and it was so beautiful. And we got so many messages after that from random strangers, you know, showing support. And I was just so grateful for that gesture. And, you know, it showed the team captain who came to our house, and he had his head down. And I'd like to think that made an impact on him too.
Right. Right.
God, this was a month and a half after he'd been here, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so we just had to figure out a path forward, right? And you know, I felt very alone. I know you have, and others in the community have. We had been part of this cancer family community for a really long time, and I wanted nothing to do with them.
Right.
Only 9 kids pass a year is another stat that I recently came across, and we were one of those 9, and that means there are many, many, many kids who don't pass away, and that's a great thing. It really, but I didn't want to hear it. You know?
It's so funny because I think it's probably both ways, right? You don't want to hear it, and they don't want to hear it either.
No,
because they're so scared that it could be them that they don't want to see you either. So,
well,
it's hard in some ways, you know. It's so hard.
And you know, I had befriended people even when we were in the hospital that last time, other parents and even another family who had just had a stem cell transplant. And she admitted to me later that she did not want to hear about my story, you know?
No.
And I
just makes it more real that it could happen to them.
Yeah. But I did very early on have that sense of relief in a way that I wasn't in that world anymore. I would give anything to have him back, but life without cancer was so much simpler for us, you know, as a family. My fears were gone. I didn't, you know, it went from this highly charged stress state where you've got a child in the hospital and you're trying different treatments and you don't know what's going to work. And then you're in an ICU to just being home.
Yeah.
And it being quiet. And in a way that's difficult for sure, because you try to figure out what your identity is and what your purpose is now.
Yes.
At the same time, I just felt relief. My fear was replaced with a lot of other, you know, feelings, right? Grief and despair and sadness. But I didn't have fear anymore in my life. I didn't have as much uncertainty in my life, which I guess is a bit of a gift, right?
Yeah. That's so funny because that's a real difference between you and me, because mine was so sudden and tragic and completely out of the blue that fear entered my life and became such a part of it then, because it was like, if this can happen in 2 seconds, then it could happen again. And so I think it can do both things. Like, you were living in fear, and so then that got away. And I was living a totally oblivious, normal life until fear came in. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I do completely understand that if this can happen, you know, to one child, it can happen to another. And you know, I do have those feelings. You know,
but I think you were living with fear every day. That's just such the difference of when it's something tragic and sudden and you're not living with fear, you know. I think it's just a difference. It's just a difference.
Yeah. And what it did for me in a way, which again is one of those small gifts that you have to try to take for what it is, it does certainly make you appreciate the time you still have, you know, with us, right? I have 2 little girls. I remember I was saying to a friend early on, you know, because my daughter was only 3 at that point. I said, like, I still have a long future with my kids. My 3-year-old, you know, she still needs me to help wipe her butt sometimes. Like, they're still little.
Right.
You know, they need me. They need me. They need us as a family. And there's still a lot of firsts for me that I get to experience, you know, school, all those things. I still have all that available to me. And I don't want that. I don't want to be unable to appreciate them and all of the joys and the beauty that they add to our life. And so, you know, it really made me want to, as much as I feel my grief and it hits me and it's always there, I really do try to live in a place where I'm grateful and I appreciate the life I still have. And I try to make the best of every day. And, you know, my girls are, you know, so joyful and so sweet. And they really do lift me up when I need it the most.
Well, and you do want them to have a joyful, happy childhood, right? You don't want it to now just be sadness for them, especially when you know, when this happened when you're 3 years old, you're so little. There's, you know, still appreciating Santa and birthday presents and just going on the swing outside and all of that kind of fun stuff. You just want to still see that joy in her eyes with all of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we really, you know, I learned early that talking helps me. So this is why, you know, doing a podcast is healing for me.
Yeah.
to be able to talk, but also, honoring him and including him in our lives as much as possible. And that's, building, a memory room for him. It's painting rocks. It's, doing stuff with photos, tattoos, I'm always looking for something where I can do something beautiful in his name, create something and include him. And then in addition, we just talk about him all the time. And my 4-year-old asks about him all the time. And, it's bittersweet, but
Right.
I want it any other way. I need to keep his memory alive for her. So,
And keep him as a part of your family, as a part of your family forever. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so he is present all around, in different ways. And, we actually decided to do a fundraiser, couple things. So he would have turned 11 on May 8th. So that would have been 3 months after he passed. And I wanted to do something. I just didn't have a lot of capacity at that point, 3 months in. So I said, you know what? Why don't I just ask all his friends and our family, people who would have usually bought him a birthday present, to buy him a present, buy something an 11-year-old boy would like. And then we'll take all those presents and bring them to the children's hospital. Not complicated, didn't involve me going shopping for gifts, which would have just been heartbreaking for me. And we ended up with, 60 or 70 different things and gift cards and all sorts of games. And that felt really good, and that gave me a taste of how I can honor him by doing good things.
Mm-hmm.
And take the sting of a birthday out just a little bit,
Yeah.
So, because it's hard, but if I can make someone's day better, and if I can do it in his honor, then it makes me feel good.
Right.
And it brings light to something that would usually be pretty dark. And I think that's really, the future for me in terms of how I can also include him in my life is by doing good things in his name. We actually did a fundraiser in August for Cancer Care Manitoba. It was like a virtual fitness fundraiser that lasted 10 days. And I made a team of 11 people and we called ourselves Living for Nick. And the concept is we keep living for him. And we have fun and we do good things and we laugh and we do it because we can.
Yeah.
And he would want us to keep living. And we had t-shirts made and we took all sorts of pictures of us doing fun things that he would have loved. I jumped on a trampoline, which I hate, but I did. I knew he'd love it, and I laughed so hard, and I had so much fun, and I said thank you to him for that.
Yeah.
And, we played badminton, and we played lawn games, and we went biking, and we raised $20,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It felt so good, and I thought, this concept of living for Nick is, I think something I can build on and something that I can make as a legacy for him, and to show that there is life after loss, and it's different and it's hard and it's not always jumping on trampolines and laughing, but it can be sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
If it can help another family who has a son who has cancer, maybe find a treatment that works, then that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he would be proud of us for doing that.
No question. He would be very proud. Very proud.
So we continue on in his name, and we try to be grateful for what we have and for our family. And, I think of him every day. And
yeah. many, many times every day, right? All day.
And I finally, you know, I'm at a stage now in my grief where I kind of resonate with that statement you've made a few times now, where I go, I can't believe this is my life now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this before and after, how I'm this person, and I have, you know, I have a purpose, and I have this grief that I carry with me, and I have the story. And that's also why I wanted to come on the podcast, because this is my story, and I want to honor it, and I want to share it, and I don't want to hide from it because it's my truth.
Yes.
And I've been so comforted by so many other stories, and I just hope I can do the same for someone else.
I know you have. I know you have. Well, thank you so much for sharing your son with us and for sharing your story, because it is really very inspiring. And I know that I will think about living for Luke. I can't say it right. It's just impossible for me to say it right. Sorry. So thanks again.
So much. This was really good for me. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. We are always looking for new show ideas. If you'd like to be a guest, know someone who'd be a great guest, or have a show idea, please email us at marcy@andysmom.com. Be sure to visit the webpage, andysmom.com, for more content, including Marcy's blog. There you can also sign up to receive updates via email. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.